Development Secretary to the Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I'll be sharing my time with my colleague, the member for La Prairie.
Today to speak to the Spring Economic Statement and to confirm that I will be voting in support of Bill C-30, an act to implement certain provisions of the Spring Economic Update that was tabled in the House of Commons on April 28th. There are many important elements within both the Act and the statement, but today I'd like to focus on two central themes. First, the proposed Canada Strong Fund and what it represents in terms of for the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming as providing an opportunity to be all in for Canada. And secondly, I would like to speak on the many ways that Canada is supporting the residents of Nipissing-Timiskaming, demonstrating that Canada is also all in for its citizens. And I'm glad today that in this House there are members from my riding. On that note, I did, Mr. Speaker, spend the last 2 weeks in my riding meeting with residents, attending community events and local functions. What I sensed in general was a growing feeling that this is a moment for Canadians to come together. I believe it's much like being part of a team, and I'm sure fans of the Montreal Canadiens understand the analogy well, especially today. When the stakes are high, it is not the time to sit back on the bench. It is time to ask, how can I contribute to the success of the team? Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing for Canada today. There are going to be different opinions with respect to our strategy, but once the game has started, the success depends on our ability to move forward together to a common goal. And in many ways, this moment reminds me of the period following the Second World War. I wasn't there then, obviously, but based on what we learned from books, when Canada faced the immense task of rebuilding and strengthening the country. And at that time, Canadians had the opportunity to participate directly in nation building through Canada Savings Bonds.
As part of the Spring Economic Statement, the Prime Minister announced the Canada Strong Fund, the country's first national sovereign wealth fund. This proposed fund will allow individual Canadians to co-invest alongside institutional partners in large-scale nation-building infrastructure projects. Now, the final design of the fund, and while they've just discussed it here today, the final design has not yet been announced, as it will be shaped through consultations that will begin shortly. Yet, even at this early stage, the spirit behind the initiative reminds me of the era of Canada Savings Bond that was established in 1945 under Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King. And for generations, Canadian savings bonds provided Canadians with a trusted and accessible way to support the growth and the transformation of the economy while building wealth for themselves and their families. They were promoted not merely as financial instruments, but as tools of nation building, fostering a culture of shared economic purpose during a period when millions of Canadians were emerging from uncertainty and insecurity. One constituent in my riding recently shared with me how much pride his father had, and his father worked for a small township in Timiskaming, and he earned a modest income. Yet, his son speaks of how his father was proud when he purchased his first Canada Savings Bond, because what it meant for him was that he was contributing to Canada, to its growth, to the country he loved, and to something that was larger than himself. I can actually relate to that personally, because when I started to work, I purchased my own Canada Savings Bonds. I was in my 20s, and I'm somewhat embarrassed to say that my motivation was not about savings at that age, but it was about contributing to Canada. It was about supporting my country and feeling connected to something bigger than myself. Although the program ended almost a decade ago, for almost 70 years, it meant the opportunity for Canadians to contribute directly to our country's success. And so because of my own experience and what I continue to hear from residents across Nipissing-Timiskaming, I strongly support both the concept and the rationale behind the proposed Canada Strong Fund. A strong economy is not built by government and industry alone. It's built when citizens feel connected to the opportunities ahead and confident that they have a role to play in shaping its future. The Canada Strong Fund is about building Canada together. From energy to infrastructure to mining, the fund will invest across key sectors while delivering market rate returns for Canadians who choose to participate. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, what I particularly appreciate is the importance the Prime Minister places on making the fund accessible to all Canadians, regardless of their economic circumstances. And in my view, this is important because it strengthens Canadians' connection to their country and the values that define us. And in many ways, the proposed Strong Canada Fund reflects the same spirit that once drove Canada's savings bonds. As Prime Minister Mackenzie King once said, our task is to ensure a greater measure of security for all citizens. Today, Canada is pursuing that same goal, to offer Canadians greater security and certainty in an era marked by global economic and geopolitical uncertainty. And in this House, as others have said,
that has the back of its citizens in practical and meaningful ways. Canada is supporting families, workers, seniors, businesses, and communities, including the residents of my riding, Nipissing-Timiskaming. And so while time permits only a few examples, these measures demonstrate how federal investments are making a tangible difference in the lives of the people in my riding. Last week, I was pleased to announce funding through the Regional Tariff Response Initiative to support 5 prominent mining sector companies in my riding as they modernize and expand their operations in the face of unfair and unjust tariffs. These investments will protect jobs and create better paying jobs still throughout our riding. Through the Strategic Response Fund, we also saw approval for Electro Battery Materials Corporation, their $100 million project to produce battery-grade cobalt sulfate in Timiskaming. For our country, domestic cobalt sulfate production will reduce the reliance on imports and strengthen key sectors such as electric vehicles, defense manufacturing, semiconductors, and medical technologies. For Nipissing-Timiskaming, that represents 60 direct jobs, and while during the construction, 100 skilled trade workers that will be working on the construction site. Last week, I was pleased to confirm an investment through the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative to support the construction of 60 affordable homes in North Bay. Affordable housing remains one of the most...
Point of order from the member for Leduc-Wetaskiwin.
Yeah, I just point out that spending as much money as the government is spending right now, perhaps we could at least maintain quorum in the House of Commons. I think that there aren't enough...
Quorum call from the member.
Oh, here they come. Here they come. Oh, they are? You mean there's more than 4 of you here today?
I believe we have quorum. I will let the Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Rural Development continue and finish her comments.
Merci. Thank you for that. And I also wanted to point out, Mr. President, that I was surprised actually to see the numbers, that in my riding, approximately 28,000 residents will begin benefiting from the new groceries and essential benefits in July. There's more than 14,000 residents in Nipissing-Timiskaming that qualify for dental care support, more than 12,000 elementary school students that benefit from healthy meal programs, and over 10,000 families are receiving allowance through the Canada Child Benefit. Then there is the very strong support in Nipissing-Timiskaming for the recently announced 13% HST relief on new homes. This measure will help make home ownership more attainable for young people and families seeking to enter the housing market. At the same time, the federal government and the province of Ontario have announced an $8.8 billion cost-shared infrastructure program over 10 years to support municipalities. This funding will help lower development costs for contractors and home builders while ensuring continued investment in roads, water systems, and other housing-enabling infrastructure. These are precisely the kind of measures municipalities, builders, and organizations such as the Northern Ontario Home Builders Associations have been calling for. Alors, Monsieur le Président.
So, Mr. Speaker, I am reaching the end of my speech, but I'd like to say, to possibly mention, we have in North Ontario We have FedNor and Farm Credit Canada programs. It will help us to protect our sovereignty, which is very important for North Bay.
Mr. President, I will conclude. These measures demonstrate how Canada is supporting the residents of Nipissing-Timiskaming and showing that our country is all in for its residents. That matters because, Mr. Speaker, the federal government has important responsibilities to protect national security and public safety, to provide support through programs such as Canada Pension Plan, Old Age Security, and to provide support to Indigenous communities to promote economic stability.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires de l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, my colleague from Nipissing-Timiskaming didn't have more time. She could have talked about her government's assistance for regional media, but there isn't any. So in this economic update, there isn't any, particularly for independent regional TV stations. And I talk about this, Mr. Speaker, because in her region, in Abitibi, local television, which provide independent news and information, are threatened because they don't have support from this government. And once again, the Liberal members will vote for this budget, even though they're turning their backs on local regional media. And for a member from Ontario, should be concerned by this. And what will she tell her minister or prime minister to convince them to help regional media? Finally, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that question greatly, and I share my colleague's concern. It's really important to have local media, and in my riding, Radio-Canada plays a very important role, and it's an important program. It plays an important role in our community with media such as Voyageur and others. So I appreciate his comments, and he can count on my support in this respect.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Souris-Miss Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've seen this government midway through this session here, midway through their term, they've changed the definitions of fiscal anchors, of what they, instead of debt to GDP, they're debt to deficit numbers. One thing I want to get a clear question, or clear answer actually, from the member opposite is, in the G7, Canada is the only country that doesn't count subnational debt when they're talking about debt to GDP. Could she maybe give us what would the number be if Canada did use the same accounting practices as all other countries?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Provincial debts, yes. So thank you very much for that question. I understand it fully, and I'd like to point out to my colleague that the International Monetary Fund is a very important organization. Practically 98% of countries across the world belong to the fund. It plays an important role in comparing economies across the world. And so what it states with respect to Canada is very important. And so basically in April, it stated that Canada, amongst the G7, is the most fiscally responsible country. And so it is a very important position that it takes, and it speaks strongly about Canada. But there are so many other indicators that we could point to, and that's why I encourage all the citizens from my colleagues' riding to read the Spring Economic Update and to see and to take good note of the many positive economic indicators.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I really appreciated my colleague's comments in regards to the Canada Strong Fund. I think it is a wonderful opportunity for Canadians to invest in Canada, and have that opportunity, I think, is something that's being provided for here. But the Conservatives have come out against it. One of the things that really surprises me, we often hear Conservatives being against the infrastructure bank, for example, a bank that has actually lured billions of dollars of investment along with the federal government, but have generated thousands of jobs, had major projects in every region of the country, and it seems to me the contrast seems to be that the current government believes in investing in Canada, investing in infrastructure and Canadians, while the Conservatives tend to just want to get out of the way, as they often say. I'm wondering if she can provide her thoughts on why it's really important that as a government we invest in Canadians and the infrastructure.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague for the question. two comments. When the International Monetary Fund speaks of Canada and its economy as being strong, it truly is the aggregate of the many organizations that work in the economic field. And so Canada's Infrastructure Bank is an excellent example of that. And so, as I said, there are many other indicators that are in support of all of the various investment actions and tools that the government is taking. With respect to the wealth fund, the sovereign fund that we've discussed, I do want to point out it's very important that the design of the funds have not been publicly announced yet. There's consultations that are underway. Just to conclude, Mr. President, there are 100 different funds across the world. And so basically the government is looking at all of these various funds as it structures what is best for Canada and for Canadians.